Hi. Okay, hold on one sec. Well, here we are together. It doesn't look like I'm looking at you, but I am. I want to say, first of all, happy anniversary to Sarah and Rob Sturtz.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy anniversary.
Down here.
Yeah, Mazel Tov, 51 years.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
That is a nice long time.
So it says here that there's no special name for the 51st wedding anniversary. And there's no special symbol. However, with a little thought and creativity, you can find something that tells your partner you'd marry them all over again, like a day with family and friends visiting, spending time together.
Yeah, go for that.
Surprise party in a local restaurant. There we go.
Yeah, local.
Fun. Okay.
Okay.
We're gonna jump in, and we're gonna stay on Bina, and we're gonna try to sort of zoom out a little bit. And I've chosen several important texts, and I think that after today we'll put to rest this chapter, this 8th chapter, which is sometimes referred to as the third sphere or the 8th gate. So it's the 8th gate because if you start from Malkhut, Yesod, Hod, Netzach, Tiferet, Gevura, Chesed, and then you get to Bina. But from the top, it's the third one down, Keter, Chochma, Bina. But all of this stuff is nothing. All of this stuff is meaningless if it doesn't help us in some way, if it doesn't illuminate. And so I want to also through today to try to get out of the weeds and to say that to remind us what is it that we're really doing. Well, what we're really doing with this Sefer is a couple of things. One is kind of on the technical level. Again, what this Sefer is, what's unique about the Sefer is that it is articulating Kabbalistic principles by elucidating the names of God, by clarifying the different names of God that are used in the Torah. So that's kind of its technical task, and there are tons and tons and tons of different names. And it's trying to tell you what each of those names, which sephira it represents, and which combination of sefirot it represents. So that's kind of what is unique about this book. But more important, more to the point, is what we're trying to do with this book is to give ourselves ways of understanding how God works in the world, and to give ourselves ways of understanding how we connect to God and how we renew ourselves, and how we can kind of walk a better path of being by having an understanding of God's work in the world. That's really like ultimately what this is about. And so if we get too lost in the woods, or you get too confused by the terminology, and not merely because I'm being unclear, but just because the texts themselves are so difficult, you can stop and you can raise your hand and you can ask a question, either clarifying, but just the task is to zoom out and to remember that that's the big picture, right? We're not here just to throw around technical jargon. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to go back over various points in the 8th gate, that is the chapter dealing with Bina, and we're going to kind of review the whole chapter. So I'm going to go back to the beginning, even though we were working our way through the chapter. I'm going to go back to the beginning, and if we zoom out enough, I think we'll be reminded of what beauty is in this Sefer. Okay, so oops, that's not, isn't that lovely? That is lovely, but that's not what I was trying to share with you. So let's try this. Hold on. Okay. Now you should be seeing texts, yes?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So now the first thing I wanted to, so remember that he opens every chapter with a different verse from Tanakh. And this one is a verse from Habakkuk, the prophet Habakkuk. And actually we just read this because it is the reading for, I think, the second day of Shavuot. It's the Haftarah for the second day of Shavuot, I think. And so we just read this a couple weeks ago. And I think it's actually the second line of the Haftarah. But I didn't actually, I realized I didn't translate this verse from Habakkuk, but let me, so actually let me do this for 1 sec, because this is going to be confusing if I don't do this. Okay, so all right. So what this verse actually means, what this verse says is, I'm going to write it out for you, okay? Because I really want to convey something that can be very, very confusing. The translation is Yud He Vav He Adonai. Okay, so these are these two names. Here's Yud He Vav He, and then Adonai, and it says, "My strength, who makes my legs like the deer's, and lets me stride upon the heights." Okay, so what I want to point out is, and I was hoping to copy a picture from. Do you know when the Chazan and I chant Haftarah? Have you ever noticed that we're reading from a particular book? We're usually not reading from the Chumash. So what that is that's a book that's specifically made for reading the Haftarah. And what it does is not only does it have the Haftarah in the reading in big letters, which makes it easier, but also it tells you how certain words are supposed to be pronounced, because once in a while words are not pronounced as it looks like they're supposed to be pronounced, and that becomes very, very important for a point that he's going to make. For a point he's going to make. So usually, let me ask you a question. Usually, when we see this 4-letter name of God, how do we usually say that?
Adonai.
Right. Usually we say Adonai, but here it's right next to this word, which is actually the word Adonai.
Right.
So this happens again all the time in the prophets. So when you're chanting the Haftarah and you see these two words next to each other, what happens is this is pronounced as Elohim. Okay, so when I was chanting this on Shavuot, I pronounced this as Elohim Adonai. Now, very often, if the words are rearranged differently, you say, of course, if it were to look like this, hold on, if it appeared like that, usually you would say Elohim Adonai. Okay, but in any event, for this particular passage from Habakkuk, it's pronounced Elohim Adonai. Okay, so that may seem like a technical issue, but this is actually going to be very, very important to him. So let us, you guys are seeing me do like real-time corrections here. Will somebody, I'll read the first verse from Habakkuk, and then somebody else will read the rest of the English. Elohim Adonai, my strength, who makes my legs like the deer's and lets me stride upon the heights. Okay, will somebody read this little bit?
We have seen fit to explain the essence of the 8th name, which is written one way and vocalized another. It is written Yud He Vav He and vocalized Elohim. This sphere is called Bina. You must be aware that this is...
This is the name. Sorry, my bad.
This is the name that connects all the Sephirot. From this name, the everflow of light, emanation, and blessing flows through all the channels until the 7 lower Sephirot are blessed from the 3 upper Sephirot.
Okay. Now, before we delve into this text, remember that what we're talking about is what what are we seeing in the world around us, or what are we sensing in the world around us, right? We can't literally, when I look out of my window right here and I see a gorgeous cloudy Portland day, I can't literally see the Sefirot. They're not a thing you can see, right? Really what the Sefirot mean are they're different dimensions that we can comprehend of how God works in the world. That's really what a Sefirah is. They're like visible aspects of God's behavior in the world. And if we contemplate them, we can understand what it means about God's action in the world and therefore about God. So really that's what we're trying to do, is explain what's happening in the world around me, okay? So what's important about this is the fact that it is written, and then I'll pause after this and take questions. It is written as Yud He Vav He, like literally, right? Those are the letters, Yud He Vav He, but it is pronounced Elohim. Okay, now remember, if we're talking about if we're in a book that's talking about the names of God, we have two names in one. It's Adonai, but it's pronounced Elohim. Right? It's Yud He Vav He, but it's pronounced Elohim. That's two different names of God at once, so to speak. Okay, and so what is the Sefirah? Sorry, I wrote sphere. That's confusing. What is the Sefirah that is designated by the letters Yud He Vav He pronounced as Elohim? That Sefirah is called Bina. Okay, that aspect of godliness in the world is called Bina. You must be aware that this is the name that connects all the Sefirot. Why does Bina connect all the Sefirot? Well, if we remember our Kabbalistic tree, if we remember the tree, if we remember the tree of life, we remember that that Bina is the third Sefirah down, and it connects what we call the upper Sefirot to the lower Sefirot. Okay, we can talk about that in a minute. But let me pause here and just see if there are any questions. Are we all good, Anne?
I just want to make sure that I understand what his purpose is in writing this. Is he saying when you're reading a holy text and you see this arrangement of words, this is kind of code for talking about Bina? Now you're supposed to be thinking about Bina while you read this.
It's a really, really, really great and important question. And that question actually puzzled me for some time when I first started learning this book. It's like, is this just a decoder ring? And the answer is yes, it is a decoder ring, but also he's trying to teach you the Kabbalah itself. He's trying to give you the experience of Kabbalah. And so, there's also a very important historical question that's wrapped up in your question that I'm not going to address, and that is, sorry, ask it again. How did you phrase it?
Well, the question is, what is his purpose for writing the book? What is he trying to tell us by giving us this way of reading those two words?
Right. So yeah, so he's trying to tell you how the universe is wired. He's trying to tell you this is how God operates in the world, with these different dimensions and different forces. And therefore he's giving you tools for contemplation, and through the contemplation cleaving to God. Is that an answer? You look unsatisfied.
Well, I mean, he could just tell us that sometimes we pronounce this word Adonai and sometimes we pronounce it Elohim. And when we pronounce it Elohim, that means this. And
Right. And you're saying he's not doing that?
Well,
that's where we're going.
Okay, so what's the this? What does it mean when we read the Elohim?
Well, hold on. Give me a minute. That's where we're going. Yeah, no, right, no, but you're right. No, but we haven't talked about that yet. But that's exactly where we're going. And if my answer doesn't really address what you're saying, then you should let me know, and we'll circle back, because that if we don't get there, then I'm definitely not doing my job. Okay, but just hold on for one moment. Now I've lost control of my computer and I can't. Okay, so one moment here. Let me get the tree of life. Actually, that's not what I want. Hold on. Sorry, guys. Tree of life. Where are you? There you are. Okay. Are you seeing a picture of the tree of life right here?
No.
No.
Okay, hold on. Okie dokie. All right. So when he said, so he said in the text that we were just looking at, he said that, oops. Let's do this. One sec. Okay. Are you seeing the text on the left and the picture on the right? No.
Oh,
I was
Reading it.
seeing a Google page.
Ugh. Sorry, guys. I just still struggling here. Aha, there we go. Okay, now you're seeing text here and a picture here.
Yep.
Okay, so he says, I want to just focus on this part. You must be aware this name connects all the Sfirot. The reason it does, here's Keter, right? Remember that outside of Keter is the infinite, Ein Sof, which is beyond our comprehension. It's the infinite God, total unity. We can't exist with Ein Sof at the same time, and so God contracted God's self and then found a way to emanate God's light within the world, God's energy within the world in a way that allowed us to exist. So the first step of that was called Keter, and then Chokhmah. We have not studied these yet, and the beginning of the articulation of God's plan for the universe is called Bina. That's what we're studying right now. Okay, and we really cannot access Chokhmah. When I say access, like through our contemplation, we can't really truly get to Chokhmah. Chokhmah is this force that flows into the world and sustains it, which we'll talk about next time. But we can actually, Bina is what connects the lower Sfirot, as he'll talk about, the lower dimensions of God's reality to their source in the infinite above, okay? So that's what he means when he says, you must be aware this name connects all the Sfirot, because it's sort of the linchpin. The lower ones have access to it, and the higher ones have access to it. So this is kind of the linchpin, the cornerstone in some ways. From this name, the everflow of light and emanation and blessing flows through all of the channels until the seventh lower Sfirot are blessed from the three upper Sfirot. Okay, we still have not yet answered Anne's question, but we're going to. So Bina is the thing. So if we ask the question, okay, where God is infinite, God contains all possibilities, God is beyond human understanding, what is it that allows that infinity of God to flow into the world and sustain us? That's a thing we call Bina. Okay, the aspect of God that shares God's infinity and brings it down into a way that we can begin to relate to it and to comprehend it. Bina is the vessel for that. Okay. Now that's going to lead us to an answer to, I believe, an answer to Anne's question. Okay, so Anne, will you read this paragraph?
From this name, the attribute of din begins to be drawn to the Sfirot, but this is not absolute din, for it is contained in the world of mercy. It is therefore penned in the form of rachamim and is vocalized with the sound of din, written as Yud-He Vav-He and pronounced as Elohim.
Okay, so admittedly, that is pretty mind-blowing and hard to understand. So let's just go back over it. Nod your head if that was baffling and hard to understand. Okay, good. Good. So I read somewhere that Niels Bohr, actually I saw this quote attributed to a couple of different people, but one of the ones I saw it first attributed to Niels Bohr, and it said that if you read, if you study quantum physics and your mind isn't blown, you did not understand it. So similarly, if you read this paragraph and you understood it, you didn't understand it. So, okay, so let's go back over it. So do you remember what deen is? Do you remember what deen is? Can anybody tell me what deen or gevura is?
Judgment.
Right, it's judgment, but and it's also delineation, right? Deen is the force that allows you to be you and me to be me. Not just your physical body, but your consciousness is you, my consciousness is me, right? So it's really the quality of delineation. Without deen, the world would not exist, right? Without deen, the world would not exist. But if it were absolute deen, if it were absolute judgment, the world would collapse on itself, right? If the world was being, if God, so to speak, were judging and creating a world of perfect justice, so that every time I did something wrong, I was punished, the world would fall apart. And therefore, God introduces mercy. So the name Yud He Vav He, bear with me, and then I'll take questions. The name Yud He Vav He, this name represents God's mercy. So the name is written as mercy, but it's pronounced as judgment, right? Remember, we say Elohim. It's written as mercy. It's pronounced as judgment. So it's mercy and deen simultaneously. So it's the force that allows for delineation and judgment, but it's covered with mercy so that things can sustain. Okay? So that's why he says from this name, the attribute of deen, that is Elohim, right? That's what we say when we're pronouncing it in this context, as in the verse in Habakkuk. Elohim begins to be drawn down to the Sefirot, but it's not absolute. It's not the absolute power of separation and judgment. There's something that needs to hold everything together, and that is mercy. And it's because at its core, it's the four-letter name of God representing mercy. So if we take the names of the God part out of it, which on the one hand is silly to do with this book because that's what the whole book is about, but for a moment, what is he trying to say? What he's trying to say is there's some force in the world that allows separation. It keeps things apart. That force is also tied together with judgment and discernment. That force on its own the world would be destroyed if that's all that was there, if we just lived in a world of pure deen and delineation and separation. What is it that allows the world to exist as separation, but also hold it together, allows it to exist in judgment, but also not such firm judgment that we're torn apart? It's the fact that at the same time, there's some sense of mercy that's holding things together, right? I can make mistakes, I can screw up, I can go deep down into my ego, right, deep down into the world of deen, but I don't disappear into myself. I can come back out and you're still there, and I can reach out to you, and we can connect. When I make mistakes, I can do teshuva. That's mercy. And so mercy and deen exist together, and that's why we have the name of mercy written, but pronounced as Elohim, which represents deen. All right, let me pause there. And what are your questions? Because I know you got them.
That cleared it all up for me.
You're being sarcastic.
Well, no, I really love this idea that written as judgment but pronounced with mercy. That explains why we care. That sometimes Yud He Vav He is set Adonai. Sometimes it's said Elohim. It explains what that connotes, what the difference is when you say it one way or the other.
Right. But you're less clear about what part. And then Serena is next.
Oh, I'm loving it.
Okay. Serena, what's your question?
Here, yeah, mind blowing.
On a more literal or basic level, just out of curiosity, does the Hebrew of the written part actually mean mercy and judgment?
Great question. No, the simple answer is no.
Okay.
The written part is just the 4-letter name of God, which really is tied to the verb to be. Like God's name really means being or beingness. But no, the Kabbalists associated that name with mercy. And actually, that we're not going to go into it, but that name in Kabbalah is actually you can't overstate the importance of the 4-letter name of God, because it also encapsulates all 10 of the Sefirot. So that name is multivalent in Kabbalah, but in the context of this chapter, it means it's the name of mercy. But yeah. Okay, so now this word here, in further part of answering Serena's question, this word here, rachamim, does actually mean mercy, but these letters don't spell rachamim. Okay, now, okay, so again, this tension between deen and rachamim is so important, between judgment and mercy is so important. And a way to think about it is, we have all, and I'm definitely straying from his book here, so I want to be careful that you know that this is my riff on what he's saying. When we look out into the world and you see all of this separation, and simply meaning there's me and there's you and there's a tree and there's my house and there's me and there's the window and everything else. If we lived in a world of pure deen, even if we take out for a minute the valence of the word deen as judgment, if we lived in a world of pure separation, we would never be able to bridge the abyss between us, right? We would just be living in a world of complete separation and loneliness, and to an extent that we can't even imagine. There would be no way to bridge the kind of physical and psychological gap between consciousness and between different beings. And we can't even imagine what that would be like. Like I would look at a tree and I would have no relationship to it. It wouldn't look beautiful to me. I wouldn't be curious about its origins. It wouldn't signify anything. We'd just be in these completely isolated, entities of consciousness. And so what is it that allows us to move beyond deen and to have, to connect and to relate and to evoke and to get out of the prism of loneliness and cross the abyss of consciousness? That's something we're calling mercy, all right? For want of a better term, we're calling that rachamim. God allows us to transcend that, so we can have a world. So, okay, yeah. So Bina brings both of these forces together, right? And on the other hand, if we only had connection and we didn't have delineation, then I wouldn't be me and you wouldn't be you. Okay, you with me? All right. Looks like I lost a paragraph there. Let me just see what I was going to share with you. Well, maybe that was it. Okay. Let us see. I'm going to skip that. Okay, this one is beautiful. I want us to focus on this. Okay, will somebody read this paragraph, and then so now we're changing channels. We're going to a new topic within the chapter of Bina. Excuse me.
You're not sharing your screen yet.
Oh, man. Okay. Somebody want to read that? Any English readers? Take yourself
Okay. I'll do it again. For it was with the attribute of Bina that we left Egypt, as we shall, God willing, explain in the future. For in the 3rd month of the exodus of the children of Israel from Egypt, the Torah was given. What does this mean? It means they left Egypt with Bina, as it is written, with Hamushim, they went to the land of Israel from Egypt, from Exodus,
Okay, pause,
This-
pause, 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 pause.
Okay.
So this is, there are a couple things already to pull apart here. So this word, this word chamushim, you see that? So this is just a really odd word that appears if we were to look up this verse, which we're not going to. When the Israelites start their exodus, it says that they went up from Egypt, chamushim. It's an adjective, and usually it's translated as armed, meaning they came out of Egypt and they had provisions and they had weaponry, et cetera, et cetera. There are other interpretations of what it might mean, but just on the simple level, chamushim means armed. The root of the word chamushim is 5 or 50, right? So what do we call the books that we have when you're in shul and you're reading the Torah?
Chumash.
It's called a chumash, right? Chumash comes from the word 5 because there are 5 books of Moses. And the word 50 is chamishim. So if we had time, we could go down in a whole exploration as to why the word for armed is related to the word 5, historically, grammatically, but we're not going to go there. But just for right now, just know that there's a word that sounds like 5 and it sounds like 50, but on the literal level, it means armed. Okay, so when they came out of Egypt, the Torah says, with chumashim, they went to the land of Israel from Egypt. Again, usually it's translated as they came out of Egypt armed. Okay, so now keep going.
This verse is referring to Bina, which is the third Sephira in the exodus of the children of Israel from Egypt. On this day, they came to the Sinai desert. For the one who knows the essence of these principles will be merited with seeing the pleasant nature of Yud-He Vav-He and be able to visit his palace, where this is Kol Adam.
Okay, so we'll talk about that in a minute, and I'll explain why I didn't choose to translate it. So there are a couple of things going on here. What's he doing with he's trying to explain the third month, and specifically the third. What's he doing with that?
Third month, third Sephira.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. So the Torah literally says in the third month, the Torah was given, okay? And when you're reading it, you wouldn't really think about anything else except, okay, great, it took them 3 months to get to Sinai. But he says, no, that's not the way to read it. Third, it says third and not second and not fourth for a reason, according to the Kabbalists. Because one, Keter, that's the beginning of the divine desire to create a world. 2, Chokhmah is like the as we'll talk about when we get there, is like the underlying unarticulated conception or thoughts about how the world might look. Bina, it begins to be articulated in a way that we can access. The third month, so to speak. So then you could say, well, why are the Sefirot called months? That part you have to just sort of ignore. We're focusing on the part that says third. So what he's reading it as, in the third Sefira, or maybe through the third Sefira, the Israelites came from Egypt and the Torah was given. Okay? So now we have to understand Torah as being not just the literal 5 books that we hold in our hands when we go to shul, or that I chant. We have to understand Torah in a much broader way as being like the revelation of God's self to the world. Okay? So we came out of Egypt through Bina, through God's unfolding God's self into the world. Okay? Or if you want to have a more daring reading of it, what does it mean to let go of all of the lower illusions about existence and just be purely imprinted by God's being in the world, as though you could just if you could really just let go of everything and just tune in to God's revelation in the world, we would call that Bina. Okay, so let me pause there and take questions, because I want to make sure I'm not just talking, but we're actually understanding and moving along here. Man, I am like a champion teacher if nobody has questions. All right, we're good? Thumbs up? Am I going too slow? Should I speed up?
I get one.
No, you should answer my question. Let's see. In reading that passage, it looks like he's using the exodus from Egypt as kind of a metaphor for the, I don't know if it would be the escape of of God from its sort of just oneness to manifesting in different ways.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a minute. That's exactly right. And by the way, your internet signal is really not good. It sounded like you were a robot on Valium. So so what you just said is really, really important, because that's exactly right. Now look, as a way into what Cheryl just said, look what he says at the end. For the one who knows the essence of these principles will be merited with seeing the pleasant nature of Yud-He Vav-He and be able to visit his palace, right? So clearly, he's not just talking about the historical exodus that we read about that happened thousands of years ago, right? If he says, he's saying, if you understand what I just said about Egypt, you will be able to visit God in God's palace. So clearly, he does mean he does mean Egypt, but he also means Egypt. And this is, I have to confess, a part of the Kabbalah that I really have not been able to understand. Just this is a footnote. The ways in which they view the Torah is not only symbolic language pointing to spiritual truths. It is simultaneously, for the medieval Kabbalists, it is also a story about actual events, as far as I can tell. But it is also symbolic language describing the nature of reality. I've found that very, very hard to understand. But in any event, let's just stay on the symbolic level. Yes, absolutely. He is saying Egypt was a place of narrowness, right? Actually, the word Mitzrayim, as many of you know, means narrow place, right? A place of confine. So imagine yourself as like a narrow place. The world of separation is a narrow place. And how do you come out of the narrow place? By awareness of all of the different connections to one another and of God's kind of beaming living energy into the world. That is Bina. That is what brings you out of Egypt to come to God's palace, so to speak. Now, when he says God's palace, he means a specific thing, because if we go back here, remember, we cannot get in here. We can't really get into that. So we can't get to God's self, but we can get into God's palace, which is the inner understanding of like the getting as close as we can to the source of God's radiant, beaming, loving energy into the world. And to do that, we have to get out of the things that separate us from that in our consciousness. Okay? So yes, Egypt, there is, this is a task for all of us, to leave Egypt through clinging to Bina, through clearing away all of the illusions and getting right to the living source of God's energy flowing into the world. Okay? Easier said than done, but that's the task. Okay. Let's see here. Do I want to go there? Do I want to go below, further down? Yeah, okay, this is beautiful. Okay, again, this is from within the same chapter, but it's a few paragraphs later, so we're now going to the next thing. You kind of forget well, don't forget, but we're moving on from the previous concept. Lenny, I happen to be looking at you. Will you read this for me, this bit? Well, you're muted, my friend. You're muted.
The Sephira Bina draws the upper everflow from the source to the seven Sephirot beneath her until the attribute of Malkhut, is filled with everflow and blessing.
Let's pause there for a second. Let's pause
Sounds
there for a
like,
second.
what is that called? That, because we don't do it after you do Lecha Dodi. You know, what's that prayer, the Aramaic prayer?
Oh, do you mean the yeah, indeed Nephesh?
Yeah, no, I'll think of it in a
Okay,
minute.
okay.
It's yeah.
Okay, so so let's just pull this magnificent and very confusing sentence apart. Okay, the sphere of Bina draws the upper everflow. What is the upper everflow? Anybody want to try to articulate what he might mean by that? What is everflow? What does the word itself suggest?
The eminence from God.
Right, God's emanating energy. Why is the world continuing to exist right now? What is animating the universe? Why isn't it stopped and collapsed and just decaying? Because, you know, why are the flowers in bloom right now and then they're going to die and then next year we know that they're going to come out again? And why am I here and why do I have consciousness? Because God is constantly flowing, that was weird, flowing life and love and energy into the world. That's why the world exists, because God is actively doing that. That is the everflow. Okay, it draws it from the source, that is from up here, like God's desire to bestow upon us, and it takes it and it allows it to be felt and understood and absorbed into the universe. Okay, so it draws the upper everflow from the source up here, beneath her, that is to the lower sphirot, until the attribute of Malkhut is filled with everflow and blessing. Malkhut is the realm that we live in, right? All beings have their root in Malkhut. Every created thing, whether it's a person, a tree, a slug, air, every physical thing has its root in Malkhut. Malkhut is what we're accessing when we begin to be aware of divine consciousness around us. And where does Malkhut get all of these different dimensions that allow life to exist with the beauty that's contained within it, and the hope and the possibility and the sustaining life from the infinite? Bina is the vehicle that distributes it all down. Okay? So put differently, Bina, if I were going to rephrase this in totally hopefully plainer English, I would say Bina is that quality is that word that we use to describe the fact that the infinite creator brings life and goodness down into the world. Okay? That's the decoded version. Okay, keep going. Lenny, you want to keep going?
Malkhut draws a variety of blessings and everflow from the Sephirot above her, and then she sustains all who are found above and below her, for the Sephira of Malkhut is the essence of the great sustainer who sustains all creatures.
Let's pause there for a second, because that's actually, I want you to just read that sentence again, and we're going to talk about something that's very strange. Read it very carefully.
Do you want me to read it?
No, I mean, just
Okay.
read it to ourselves. So what could it mean, or what do you think he means? But one second, let me just, what does it mean when it says the sphere of Malkhut is the essence of the great sustainer?
What's the Hebrew word for essence there?
Well, he says it's the secret. The word is sod, but sod is an incredibly complicated word. It literally, as you may know, sod literally means secret, and it's a hugely important word in Kabbalah. It is very hard to translate because it does not always mean a secret. I think essence is a reasonable translation, but he actually, yeah, he sod parnes hagadol. It's the, yeah, you can even translate it as the secret of the great sustainer who sustains all things. Okay? So what he's saying is that Malkhut is the realm where all of the divine potential from all of these different aspects of the divine, all of the different tools in the divine toolbox become manifest in sustaining us, not just sustaining us with food and money, that's actually the least of it, sustaining us with the very energy to exist in life, okay? Malkhut is the secret or the essence of the great sustainer. That's the quality of God that is allowing us to exist and to continue to exist, to sustain our lives. Okay, keep going.
Where am I? If this is so, these two Sephirot, Bina and Malkhut, face one another. And from the attribute Bina will come all blessings to the attribute of Malkhut, the essence of which is, and a river went out from Eden.
Okay, so now let's talk about this, and then we'll pause. Okay, so when he says Bina and Malkhut face each other, he's just, that just means they have an important relationship to each other, and there's almost like a mirror quality. And what that means is that Bina faces Malkhut in the sense that the entire purpose, so to speak, of Bina, drawing God's infinite light into the created world, is so that Malkhut will give rise to created beings. So that, I think that's what he means when he says Malkhut and Bina face each other. They have a particularly special relationship in that Malkhut is the fulfillment of Bina's purpose, which is to draw divine light into an articulated, so to speak, created world.
It took me a second to think of it. It's the Kagavna.
Oh, okay. I've not had that as part of my services. But why did that remind you of it?
Oh, because sounds like it was taken directly out of this section over here.
Interesting.
They do it at Chabad.
Got it. Okay. Right. I'm going to look that up because it's not something we've used. But I just Googled it and I'm already intrigued. Okay. Okay. So that's what he means when he says the two Sefirot face one another. And from the attribute of Bina will come all blessings to the attribute of Malkhut, right? Bina is not the source, right? The source is the infinite God. But Bina is the one that takes that concept of God's infinitude and desire to bestow blessing. And Bina is the thing that makes it comprehensible and articulated and brings it into the world. And then therefore gives us the ability to relate to it and to see it and to understand it. And then the attribute of Bina, from the attribute of Bina will come all blessing to the attribute of Malkhut, the essence of which is, and a river went out from Eden. A river went out from Eden. So this is a quote from the creation story, from the book of Genesis, in which the Torah tells us that a river went out from Eden and eventually it went into 4 different rivers. But how is he employing this verse here? What, if you had to put this into your own words, how does a river going from Eden relate to Malkhut?
Well, does it have to do with the flow from the everflow from God?
Exactly, right. Eden represents, I don't know, it could represent Keter, or it could just represent Ein Sof, God's infinite essence. A river went out from that. Okay, and the river, so it's just yet another, it's using the Torah for yet another metaphorical image to describe God's relationship to the world. A river went out from Eden and flowed into Malkhut. Okay, so just as when you see a river, you don't think to yourself, oh, this river is the source of all water. You know that river is flowing from some greater source, like from the it's flowing from the heavens, right? Because rain comes down to the mountains, and the mountains flow down into the street to the various sources for the river, and all those sources come into the river itself. But if you trace the river back, eventually you'd go to the top of the mountain where the snowpack is, and then you'd say, what's the source of the snowpack? And you'd look up and you would see the moisture in the world, and you'd see in the skies, and you'd see the rain coming down. In the same way, Malkhut is like a river. Everything you see around you is flowing into you. And if you follow its source back, you're going to see it's coming from here, from Bina. Because again, we can't trace it beyond here. There's sort of like a hard red line here in terms of human consciousness. We can't really conceive of what's beyond Bina. We can't access that. Okay, I'm gonna hit the pause button. Questions? Raise your hand if if you're a person who just really is lost, please have the courage to raise your hand. Okay. All right. I see one hand up, and I see a couple of heads nodding sympathetically. All right, there we go, with the courageous souls. And then there are a few people sitting on their hands. So that's okay. So are you able to articulate the part that's confusing you, or is like the whole thing just so like, what the heck are you talking about? Miki?
The whole thing. I just don't follow it.
Right. Okay.
Me too.
I don't know enough to ask a question.
Okay. All right. I've completely been there. And in some ways, in some ways that may mean that you're paying close attention. I was saying to Chana yesterday, I'm reading this book, and actually I want to ask you all about a question about this a little bit later. I'm reading this book called, and I referenced this last night in my conversation with Tzvi Fisher, 138 openings of wisdom. It's Kalach Pitre Chochma, which is a book by the Ramchal. And I spent, I don't know, 6 or 7 hours reading a single chapter of 4 pages.
Wow.
I could have just read it and just kept barreling along, but I chose not to. And so, saying I don't understand this is actually really, really important. So let me try to articulate it, and then if you're feeling lost, let's talk, because I want to make sure to convey to let's talk offline, because I want to make sure everyone's coming along. It is comprehensible. So if you're not understanding it, it's because I'm not speaking a language that's resonating with you. So, if we look, if we imagine being able to look beyond our own consciousness into the infinite, and we could really completely unify with God. So we would be completely one with God. So there would no longer be a Miki, and there would no longer be a Josh. There would just be God, right? Then in a way, we would have full understanding of what makes of God's reality, because we would be part of it. Okay. But that's not the case, right? We're not, that you're you, and that you're not God, and you don't even know if there is a God, and you look around and you see a world that's broken. And now we're asking the question, well, how is it that the world around me is sustained? Why does the world exist? And then if we ask that question, we might begin to see, well, I look around and I just see a bunch of disparate parts, and I don't see anything unifying them. All right, there's no togetherness in the world. It's just a place of total chaos and randomness. Is there anything, we might ask, is there anything that unifies them? Is there anything to provide me with hope that there's some larger prevailing order in the world? And the process of beginning to pursue that and to contemplate it, and the beginning of seeing the connections between everything is a quality of Bina. It gives what we're calling Bina, this ability to see and to perceive a world of order. So that's from the human side. That's like the psychological perspective from the human side. It's a process of contemplation and desire to see order, right? From God's side, so to speak, the process of unfolding from the initial concept, so to speak, that God had. At some point, the infinite God was saying, I want to create a world that's not infinite. I want to create a world of finitude within which created beings could exist. God first had the idea. This is from God's perspective, so to speak. God first had the desire and then the idea and laid the plans like, okay, this is what it's going to look like. This is the only way it can work. And then as that created world came into being with mountains over here and trees over there and Miki over there and just enough warmth from the sun to allow things to grow, but not too much. And all of the specifics, we're calling that Bina, the beginning of the process of God's energy flowing into the world that could sustain it. So I'm going to leave it there for now. And then those who want to talk additionally, we'll talk offline, because Miki, I know you're not alone. And Myra, I know you're not alone.
This is much different than the readings we've been doing on Leviticus, though, right?
No, same thing. Yeah, just a tiny bit. Okay, so a river went out from Eden, just circling back to where we were before. A river went out from Eden. He's reading Eden here as I think the Ein Sof, as the source of all things. And the river now flows down to us. And if we follow the origins of that river, then we get to its source, or as close as we can. And so everything around you, how did you put it? You were quoting Rabbi Goldfeder last time, Lenny, that the world is like coming at you.
The world to come is the world coming at you.
Right, as the world comes at you, right? Just right now, exactly what's happening to you right now, all of you, as I speak. Awareness is coming, time is passing, you're hearing, seeing, feeling, all of that is, you're in Malkhut. And if you trace the river of Malkhut back to its source, we have to go through Bina. Okay, that's a way to think about it. Yeah, Miki.
Why going back to the diagram, why do you have to take that road up to Bina? Why are you not taking the other side of the diagram up to Chachma? I mean, why does it have, what makes it all flow from Bina? Why can't you just say it flows from Chachma?
Oh, great question. Well, it's an excellent question. Part of that answer, we will begin to answer that when we get into Chokhmah. Okay, but the one analogy is very often the analogy that is made with Bina. This guy doesn't make it, but I've seen in other books, is if you want to build a building, okay, if you're the architect and you have the inspiration and the thought about how this thing could work. So I think we talked about this before, and I was talking about the beautiful Guggenheim in Bilbao, museum in Bilbao, that very gorgeous, odd building. So at some point, that was just an idea. Was it Frank Gehry in his head? Doesn't matter who it was.
Oh, that wasn't Gaudi. I'm wrong. Sorry.
No. Frank Gehry's head, I think. It was just a thought and an inspiration, right? And then he began to kind of think through it. You imagine him lying awake at 2 a.m. in his bed and like, oh my God, it's going to have these odd shapes, but it's not going to look random, even though there's jutting arcs and stuff. It's going to look like it's whole. And he's got all these ideas. Okay. You are going to have no idea. You're not going to be able to access his thoughts until, let's just say you knew Frank Gehry. At what point can you access his thoughts so he can describe to you this building?
Only when you talk to him.
Huh?
When you talk with him.
Right. You talk to him, or when he writes down the ideas into the building plan. The articulating the speech is akin to Bina, or writing the plans down on it. What do they call those on the drafters table?
Blueprints.
The blueprints. When he writes the blueprints, that's akin to Bina. So when you ask, why doesn't it go through Chokhmah, or why can't we access Chokhmah? We're simply, what we're doing is we're breaking up the creative process into different stages. The reason that it doesn't go through Chokhmah is the same reason that nobody had any idea how to build his building until he started to put it into words and to write out a plan. Only then could we then go from Bina to the created world. And you will never get into Frank Gehry's head, but you can have access to his buildings, and you can have access to his plans, and these plans reveal his designs, right? The plans reveal a creative genius, a person who wants to create, a person who wants to share his ideas, a person who is very clever and thoughtful, but you cannot access that. You can only access the blueprints. Does that make some sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, to a certain extent.
Right.
You can only access what you see or what you hear.
Right.
Well,
Right.
Yeah, you can't read.
Yeah,
You can't read the mind of the divine, so to speak.
that's right. That's right.
Something an easier, I mean, I think there's a simple way too, where the creation was kind of like it was a lightning bolt that had a pattern. And that what we're looking at is going back up that lightning bolt. So there really is like a kind of a direct step down pattern and step up pattern. Like we're talking about a ladder in a lot of ways.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a nice analogy. We're talking about a ladder. Yeah, I mean, yes, I think that is a way to look at it. And in our consciousness, we're climbing this ladder that gets us to the highest point. And Bina is really the highest point that our consciousness can go.
Right.
Okay, when we begin to experience and comprehend God's blueprints for the world, so to speak.
Bina is the plans. Bina is the plan.
Well,
Yeah,
The architect's plans. That's what Bina is.
that's right.
that's that hand, right?
It's an imperfect analogy, but it illuminates one aspect of Bina. Yeah, sorry. So, oh yes, Sarah, hi.
Actually, if I had spoken a minute ago, let me just take my hand down, I would have used the word God as architect also, because as you talk about Frank Gehry, what came to mind is that in his previous constructions and other projects, there were hints of what came together in Bilbao.
Oh, interesting. That's great.
See the material, the curls, the things that truly are original, but hints of them here and there. And
Right.
I thought, how like Kabbalah, how like God's
Right.
word.
That's
in
great.
Viewing God as architect, all along we have hints.
Right. That's beautiful. Yeah. For those who don't know what we're talking about this building in Bilbao, Spain. Just astonishing and gorgeous. I'd love to go see it. But yeah, Sarah, that's very, very helpful. So okay, so now, if with your permission, I'm going to move on to another way of talking about Bina. And this one, he's going to use the language of souls. Okay, so now he wants to convey to us different words that the tradition has for souls. And to understand this next passage, you need to understand there are multiple names, and you don't have to remember what I'm about to say, but because we'll circle back to it. The kind of the lowest level of the soul. Well, sorry, in English, we have the word soul, and that's it. A person has a soul, that's it. The Kabbalists articulate multiple levels of the soul. The Nephesh is kind of the lowest level that's most closely tied to my ego. The Ruach is a kind of higher level that's connected to the world around me. And then Neshama is the name for the highest level of soul, which is really the source of where I come from. And I'll share a text with you that'll use these words, but Serena has her digital hand up. Oh, okay. Okay, so here we go. Okay, somebody want to read that? Serena, you want to read that?
Sure. In the language of the sages, this sephira is called Teshuva. The reason being that the souls emanate from this place. For the spirits Ruach, come from Tiferet, and the lower souls, Nephesh, from Sephirah Malkhut. They connect with each other until they merit an attachment with the Sephirah Bina, which is Neshama.
Okay, so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but he's assigning. So again, we're looking at this now from a different perspective, okay, a different analogy, so to speak, that has to do with our different levels of our soul and our awareness. So Bina is also, first of all, Bina is called Teshuva, okay, by the sages. So this sphera is called Teshuva. So that we should really pay attention to that, right? Because Teshuva is central to the process of being a Jew. We talk about it most commonly on the high holidays, but Teshuva is supposed to be built into our lives. How do I become an improved person? How do I come closer to God? Well, what you're drawing on, maybe this is actually a better way to get to a Bina. How is it that I can come closer to God through my behavior? How is it that I can get out of my ego and find out what God wants from me? How is it that I can take this very often mediocre person and reach out beyond that? What is it that even allows me to access something beyond myself, to inform myself about a better way to be, and a more harmonious, kind, beautiful way to be? That is Bina. And so when so I'm accessing Teshuva, I'm accessing Bina, okay? So they're interchangeable. So the reason it's called Teshuva, he says, is that the souls emanate from this place, okay? Your soul, everyone's soul, came from Bina originally, right? So the divine took the infinite and took a delineated tiny fragment of it to share it with the world, and said, okay, human beings are going to have this thing that I call a soul. So let's start. He does it from high to low. So we'll follow his model. So the neshamot, I should have written this here. Sorry. It's plural, but I'll write the singular. The souls, the singular word is neshama. That's the highest level of the soul for our purposes today. Emanate from this place. Okay, God sends neshamas into the world so they can inhabit human bodies. That neshama is pure and perfect. For the spirits, ruach, come from tiferet. Okay, so that's just another name for the soul. We're going to kind of leave that alone right now, but in some way it gets sort of somewhat less pure and perfect as it enters kind of right into the heart of the created world. And by the time it gets to us, it's Nephesh. Okay, so which is the sphere of Malkhut by analogy. He's calling Malkhut Nephesh. So a way to say this in terms of human consciousness is when I'm just kind of barely paying attention, I'm kind of operating in the level of Nephesh. Like when I'm just kind of like a conscious being, but I'm not really looking upward, so to speak. I'm not looking for God. I'm not trying to do Teshuva. I'm just kind of like doing my thing. Maybe once in a while I have an elevated thought, but for the most part, that's the level of soul we would call Nephesh. When I start to look around the world around me and I see myself as being part of this gorgeous world around me, and I see myself as interconnected with that, and I'm moved by the beauty of the world, and I see that I'm a created being and that tree is a created being and that other person, and I must have a place in this world, and I want to perceive myself as being part of this great cosmic harmony. Now I'm in the level of ruach, which is pretty heavy duty. That's a pretty good place to be. But when I want to find the source of who I am, and I want to purify myself by getting past all levels of ego and even all the physical world, and I want to get to really draw on the source of all being, now I'm trying to access neshama, because that's where neshama flows from, is Bina. Okay, so that's the aspect of Teshuva articulated through this the language of the Sefirot. Okay, Okay, actually, amazingly enough, we actually do have some time to go through this last one. So this is a long one, but I think this one I believe that you might find useful in your daily prayers. Okay, so again, now we're changing frequencies. We're going to a same chapter, but a different aspect, a different name of the Sphira, and therefore a different aspect. So somebody who has not read, who's up for reading, will you read this English?
I'll read.
Okay.
This Sephira is called Tehila, praise, and we must tell you the principles that are dependent upon this matter. You must know that these two Sephirot are Yud He Vav He and Adonai facing each other, the upper one being called Tehila. Oh, praise, thank you. I thought it was a Greek word or something. The lower one, Tequila, prayer. The reason is that the upper one is attached to the top of the steps, and from it come many kinds of emanation and everflow, blessing and life. Thus, it is called Tehila, praise, meaning that it is up to us to praise God, who has done so many miracles for us and our forefathers.
Okay, pause there. Hold on one second. Great job. So let's go back over this. It's very heavy duty. So remember that as like up here, we said that Sphira is also called Teshuva. Okay, so excuse me, we said Bina is also called Teshuva. So Bina has many different names. So it's called Teshuva. That's one name for it. Another is that this Sphira is called Tehila. Tehila means praise. So here, when he talks about the two Sphirot of Yud He Vav He and Adonai, remember that's how we opened. That's where we began, because it's written as Yud He Vav He. Excuse me. I'm sorry. That was very confusing. Sorry. I thought he was repeating the idea. It's a different idea here. My apologies. Remember when we talked about Bina and Malkhut facing each other, that part, okay? Because Malkhut, at its highest level, the consciousness of Malkhut can raise up to Bina. So Malkhut is called Adonai. I don't know if people who were in this class from the very, very beginning may not remember that. Adonai is one of the many names for Malkhut, okay? So the Sphira of Yud He Vav He and Adonai face each other. The upper one being called Tehila, praise, and the lower one called Tefila, prayer, okay? So Bina, also known as Tehila, faces Adonai, faces Malkhut, okay? Again, because Malkhut represents the fulfillment of Tefila's purpose, the fulfillment of Bina's purpose, which is to bring the divine order into being and to flow life, infinite life, life from the infinite into the created world, right? And that's only accomplished once Malkhut comes into being, okay? Once we down here receive all of that everflow, then Yud He Vav He has done its job. Okay, so therefore it is called Tehila because God has done so many wonderful, incredible things for us, and so we praise God. Tehila, okay? Praise means Tehila. So Bina is called Tehila. Okay, keep going.
Where did I?
The lower one.
The lower one. Okay. The lower one is called Tefila, prayer. The reason for this being that the lower one is attached through the essence of the tefillot, prayers and supplications, which correspond to the many sins and dirt that soil the ones who cleave to it. So the Sephira Malkhut is the essence of tefillah, which is encoded in the verse, I am tefillah.
Okay, pause there. Okay. So now just bear with me, and then we'll go back and you can interrogate this. So Bina is called Tehila, or praise, okay? Malkhut is called Adonai, but it is also called Tefila. Okay, now this is where this book gets really, really confusing. But if you can hang in there with him, what he's doing is he's expanding your spiritual vocabulary, as you'll see in a minute. He's trying to give you tools to relate to the prayers and the Torah in new ways. But it can be very confusing because it's like you need like a pocketbook for each sphere to know all the names. Okay, so Malkhut is called, one of the other names for Malkhut is Tefila. One of the other names for Bina is Tehila. Okay, so why is Malkhut called Tefila? The reason Malkhut is called Tefila is because we're the only beings that can pray. Right? The angels who maybe dwell up here in the different sphirot, they can't pray. Human beings pray. Prayer is a tool of human beings. Human beings come from the sphere of Malkhut, right? We're in the physical created world. And Tefillah is actually, in some ways, Malkhut par excellence, because it's a created being beginning to try to relate to what's above her, okay? And therefore, that's why Tefillah is associated with Malkhut and therefore becomes another name for the sphere of Malkhut. Okay, and then he quotes a psalm in which the psalmist literally says, Ani Tefillah, I am Tefillah, which, you know, when you read it on the pshat level, has like a beautiful poetry to it. I am prayer. That's a gorgeous idea, whatever it might mean. But he's saying, no, it has a specific meaning. It is Malkhut saying, I am Tefillah. I become Tefillah. I become praise of God. And again, what Tefillah is, at the risk of kind of, you know, beating this to death, prayer is you. I guess if we dwelled with God, let's put it this way, if we dwelled in perfect unity and harmony with God, we wouldn't pray because we wouldn't need to pray. The need for prayer only emerges among created beings who are aware that their source is above, so to speak, but who struggle with all of the crap that we struggle with and all of the difficulty and, you know, God help me not be a jerk, and God help me because I need this and that, and my leg hurts and I'm saying a mishaberach to such and such a person. And prayer, what prayer is the struggles of the created world trying to reach out to something beyond it. And therefore, Malkhut is the perfect metaphor for what prayer is. And so when the psalmist says, I am Tefillah, that's Malkhut saying, I am Tefillah. Okay? All right, keep going.
Because tefillah, prayer, is attached to this attribute, the other fates of prayer.
Oh, sorry, I think that's probably, what the heck is that? Probably states of prayer? One second.
It made sense. That's why I didn't question it.
Yeah, anyway, yeah, go ahead. I'm not sure what that's supposed to say.
Of prayer are fixed with a specific name for it, which is Adonai. Thus, it is the name that introduces all prayers. Adonai, open my lips and let my mouth declare your Tehila.
Okay, so there's the big payoff at the end. So before, so hold on, Lefisha Tefillah Devika, because prayer is attached, V'midazo, to this attribute, Nikva'u Sha'are Kol Tefillot. Oh, gates. There it is. Sorry.
Gates.
Okay. The other gates of prayer are fixed with a specific name from it, which is Adonai. Okay, so from it. So the prayers use the name Adonai. Right? Every prayer, right, begins Baruch Atah Adonai. Right? Because we're turning to, within Malkhut, we're trying to open up Malkhut. Adonai, hear my prayer, right? We want to like move. It's like we're rising up to Malkhut and then asking Malkhut to be our gateway to talk about the prayers. It's not just Adonai because it means, oh Lord, and we're saying, Lord, you're so great and I'm nothing, and we think that that's what prayer means. We're saying Adonai because that is the name of the access point to everything that is above it. That is what we call Malkhut. The physical world, as it begins to gain consciousness, is called Adonai. That is what Malkhut is. And so that's why we use the name specifically Malkhut, the name Adonai in prayer. Baruch atah Adonai. Of course, we say that 100 times in the morning. because that's the access point. And then before the Amidah, and of course the Amidah is the prayer par excellence, so much so that in the Talmud, the rabbis refer to the Amidah simply as the Tequila, the prayer. We know it's not literally the only prayer, but it is for the rabbis, it is the prayer par excellence. So before we say the Amidah, what do we say? Adonai, right? Malkhut, please open my lips and let my mouth declare Tehila, that is Bina. In other words, sort of somewhat creatively, I think we have to kind of creatively or flexibly read his reinterpretation. He's saying, Malkhut, give me the ability to see the highest level of God's energy coming into the world, which is Bina. Adonai, give me access to Bina. Malkhut, give me access to Bina. Allow me to move out of just the world coming at me in this created world. Allow me to get to my very source. That's really what we say when we say Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tilatech. Adonai, open my lips and let my mouth declare your Tehila. Okay, let me pause there. I don't have the illusion that everybody totally understood that, but I'm just pausing now for questions or comments, thoughts. Anne.
Why don't we aspire to Sfirot higher? Why are we only aspiring to Bina instead of to Keter?
Right, because it's Keter is so tied to God's infinity that it's literally, it's just impossible. Like, we would just die, because there can be no individuation within those. There can be no separation.
But there is potential for us to get to Bina.
Correct. I mean, yes, Bina is a very, very high level of comprehension, of contemplation. Now, whether we can fully understand Bina, I would say no. Because it's beyond, I think it's beyond the realm of intellect. But can we get to the point in our religious experience and our cleaving to God in which we are really aware that there's something coming to us from beyond us and something very pure? Yes. And when we do that, we're accessing, we're really tapping into Bina's renewing power. And that's why we call it Teshuva.
And did the Kabbalists believe that they had a clearer path there than we do?
Well, what's behind your question? Why would they have a clearer path than we, before I can answer?
I'm wondering if there's some hierarchy in who gets this connection.
Yes. Well, for starters, unless you're extremely knowledgeable, totally halachically observant, and spending all day in contemplation and studying Torah, they would think you don't really have a shot.
It's a pretty high bar.
I mean, that was the life they lived. Now, I mean, they lived lives completely devoted to contemplation and to learning. Now, I say that as like a historical fact, but I would not want us to hear that and be like, oh, well, I guess there's no point in my trying, because, I think that they also, and this is an important aspect of the shift from Kabbalah to Hasidism in the 18th century, was that the Hasidim, like the Baal Shem Tov and his followers, they did a couple of, I mean, there are aspects of Hasidism there's a very profound intellectual paradigmatic shift that happens with Hasidism as well, but I'm going to set that aside. But the other important factor of Hasidism is that they were taking the Kabbalah and trying to give access to it much more broadly, and saying that aspects of this are absolutely accessible to everybody. And but that would be a difference between, the Baal Shem and the people who came before him. Other questions, comments? Okay, so listen, the very, very best way to access all the Sfirot, including Bina, is meditation. And I don't want to sort of like kind of neuter Kabbalah and say, oh, it's all kind of the same as every other spiritual system. Obviously, that would be foolish. But what I mean is, to the extent that you can develop a consciousness that's really tapping into life and being as it emerges in real time, like, which in some sense is what you're trying to tap into at a very, very deep level of meditation, that's maybe getting a taste of what we're after here, of what he's trying to say. And I'm saying that because, you know, you read his book, you read these chapters and your head spins and you're confused and there's this name and that name. But remember, what we want to bring this down to is to bring it down to our experience and our understanding of the source of all things. And sometimes to do that, we have to, not sometimes, part of doing that is putting down the book and contemplating, which is an important part of Kabbalistic the Kabbalistic worldview, which we haven't talked about that much because we're focused on this book. Let me ask you a question now. So within a couple of weeks, within a few weeks, we're going to complete this Sefer, at least our this time around. I will be reading and trying to understand this book for the rest of my life. But at that point, we'll have to make a decision. And I am, as I said, I'm reading Kalach Pitre Chochma, this 138 Gates of Wisdom, which is has been printed in a very, very accessible English version. And this book, what I want to know is whether we want to learn this together, because what this book does is this book takes the system of the Ari, of Yitzhak Luria, and it tries to clarify it, and it does so very beautifully. But I guess so. What I want to say is this. Just bear with me, and then I just want to hear your thoughts, because we could go in other directions as well. The Kabbalah we're learning now is from the 13th century Spain, and he's Italian. So 13th century Italy and the pre-Zoharic or contemporaneous with Zoharic Kabbalah, but it is the Kabbalah that is before the Kabbalah that kind of everyone talks about when they talk about Kabbalah. When we talk about the Kabbalah of like the Kabbalah Center and the Kabbalah that most Jews learn, it's not the Kabbalah we're currently learning. It's the Kabbalah that comes out of Tzfat in the 16th century, 16th and 17th century. And when we talk about the Kabbalah that the Hasidim, that the Baal Shem Tov is drawing on, he's drawing on the Ari and the 16th century stuff. So this guy is trying to explain that Kabbalistic system and very, very systematically. What the reasons to study this book is that if you want to understand the Kabbalah of the Ari, and therefore just really greatly give yourself a good solid foundation in Kabbalah, this is a great book to learn. There are parts of it that there are parts of it that are very technical. What I would be trying to do with you is to try to take you underneath the technical aspects to appreciate the spiritual core of it. But there's just a lot of reading that as you're learning it for the first time could come across as kind of dry. But you would get through this and you would have a really good fundamental understanding of Kabbalah. That would be one possible path for us to take. Another possible path is for us to follow a Hasidic text and find a Hasidic writer like the Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev or the Baal Shem Tov or the Mea Shaloach or the Kotzker Rebbe, and to kind of follow one of those guys and look at their work. The upside of that is that in some ways the ideas are much more accessible to us and we may feel applicable to us. The downside of that is, in some ways, the last thing the world needs is another rabbi teaching Hasidism, because it seems like, you look behind any curtain or under any bench and you're going to find a rabbi teaching Hasidism. So I don't want to, I'm not sure you need me to do that, but I would be happy to do that. So you don't have to answer now. You can think about it. And we'll meet in a couple of weeks and we'll start to delve into Chokhmah. Cool?
Cool.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Be well. Bye.